Hey everybody, today I'm doing something a little new as I start my video in my car because I'm in some pretty heavy traffic on the bridge. So, forgive me for not reporting on the attack in Syria sooner, but I really like to wait and watch for the sticks to continue and finish falling before I say anything because I don't like to be wrong too much. But anyways, after really looking into this one, man, I gotta say, it feels good to be right. Okay, so my first prophecy was correct. I said it back in October before the election. I said Hillary was going to somehow orchestrate a false flag attack in Syria that would basically agitate or spur on a third world war with Russia, and her superior experience with foreign affairs was going to help her win the election. Not only that, but also just the fact that there'd be another war would definitely mean that Trump would start his candidacy, or his presidency, I should say, with some serious shit on his hands. Now, also, I know it's a false flag attack on Syria, perpetrated primarily by the United States of America, because just look at Trump's demeanor. Look at it. I mean, he has changed. He seemed to be doing all right, and now he seems somewhat defeated, somewhat sad. And you know what's sad is that this has always been my one complaint about Trump, that he wants to make a lot of good changes for America domestically, but internationally he just talks about strengthening the military, which will perpetuate the military-industrial complex. And that's a problem because he says our military's, dilapidated and, a derelict fleet that's all, run down, and we're fixing our planes with junkyard parts. And it's like, you know what? We still have over double the amount of warship tonnage in the seas than Russia and China combined. So I'm not too worried because we've got a lot of planes on those ships as well. So basically, he's going to end up being a cog in the military-industrial complex. So that's why he's not dead yet. If he refused to do things according to what the the hand that feeds him demands, he would be dead. And this is one particular field where they won't let him decide, I'm quite sure. Meaning, I'm sure someone said, hey, we're going to let you do what you want domestically a little bit because in the long run, you're just helping the people temporarily. But as long as fluoride's in the water, people are getting dumber and we're going to do whatever the hell we want with them. Okay? Anyway, problem is this. Trump's a good guy, but when it comes to foreign affairs, they will not let him decide what is going on in the long run. For sure, he's being forced to basically do a fireworks show in Syria. I've heard a report that only 29 of the 59 cruise missiles that were launched, or Tomahawk missiles that were launched, actually hit their targets. 29 out of 59, it's like, I thought we were the United States of America. I thought we could, do a drone strike and hit, a flea on a moving badger, Anyway, more later, guys. I'll get into the meat of this in a second. Milk. Milk is racist now. Yeah, it's white. And even though mine is lactose-free milk, still racist. Anyways, that's enough on milk forever. So I've given this Syria situation a lot of thought, and I've been watching a lot of footage from Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump, President Bashar al-Assad himself, as well as Mahmoud, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but a very intelligent man who's a leader in Iraq, I believe. But Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is the name. All of them have a lot of good things to say, but most of all, I've listened to a lot of analysts, kind of like myself. And what seems to be absolutely obvious at this point is that this is a false flag attack. False flag to show that Trump will pull the trigger and will be more trigger happy than Obama was, even though technically Obama was the most trigger happy president we've ever had in U.S. history, as long as he could do whatever he wanted to do with a drone. So I'm going to show you some reasons why we know this is a false flag attack. So starting with President Bashar al-Assad, we need to make sure that everyone knows that the mainstream media's account of what happened is the most absurd of all. They're saying President Bashar al-Assad, as soon as Russia eased off of them and the U.S. seemed to ease off of his back, he thought it'd be a good idea to attack his own civilians. No, definitely not the case. It does not help him, even if these are rebels that he somehow could orchestrate to do whatever he wanted. It does not help him in any way, shape, or form. First thing you always do in the case of trying to solve a crime is figure out who benefits. So, Bashar al-Assad does not benefit, so he's probably not going to. How would Vladimir Putin benefit? He's trying to help the situation. He's been invited into Syria. He's trying to de-escalate tensions with the U.S. by basically just cleaning up what's going on, fighting terrorism, etc., and keeping government somewhat stable in the region with Bashar al-Assad for the time being. And this chemical attack provoking an attack from the U.S. does not help Vladimir Putin look good at all. So in order to save face, he has to now escalate the situation, which is kind of the opposite of what he wants at this time. So going to show he's not really in bed with Trump. He moved warships right next to the coast near the city where the chemical attack was launched from and to where our missiles went to. So their warships are off the coast there now. And if the U.S. does anything more, again, just to reiterate, if you haven't heard, Trump did say that this is basically a one-time retaliation attack. He did not plan on getting any troops on the ground, which would be a huge violation of what basically Russia has been asked of. Basically, if we do anything more than what we just did, it could be World War III. We're on like this weird tipping point where we could fall into worse than any conflict we did during the Cold War, because it would be a direct U.S. and Russian conflict. Yeah, that's a huge one. So Vladimir Putin doesn't benefit. How does our president, Trump, how does he benefit? Well, it does show that he will play ball with the globalists. And, well, let me show you a clip which will show you where this is really heading down the line. Alright, so this is the DL on what's going on and what the future holds, guys. As you should be able to guess by now if you watch any of my videos or are awake at all whatsoever, watch anything, Alex Jones, for example. War is on the horizon. Yeah. So you need to be awake enough to have absolute knowledge of what's going to happen and why you should not be participating in this war or these wars. A great clip I'm about to show you of an ex-U.S. Army general. And before I even show it to you, I mean, this information is going to enlighten you, if you're not already, as to what the future holds, which you don't already know. It holds war for the U.S. because we are basically a hammer, and all problems worldwide thus have to be nails. So, you need to be informed so you know why you should not be fighting in these wars. You have the right information. I mean, all the right information. If you do enough research, you're going to realize that on a moral level, the U.S. is basically like the evil empire. Russia is the resistance. Yeah, I mean, Russia is doing a lot of good things right now, which is kind of sad because I'm a patriotic American, so I don't want to work for the military right now because, I mean, in the words of Henry Kissinger, military men are just stupid animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy. That's a direct quote. Henry Kissinger, if you didn't know, held many high-level positions within U.S. Chief of Staff in the military. and at one point was also the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, I believe. Well, okay, so let's just go ahead and go into this video because it will tell you where the U.S. military is heading, basically. This is from 2013.
Because I'd been through the Pentagon right after 9/11. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Already got Libya done.
This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
And then Syria.
We had a chance to talk about a wide range of international issues, including the situation in Syria. And I have to say that all of us who've been seeing the terrible pictures coming out of Syria and Homs recently recognize it is absolutely imperative for the international community to rally and send a clear message to President Assad that it is time for a transition, it is time for that regime to move on, and it is time to stop the killing of Syrian citizens by their own government.
Lebanon.
They both had different reasons, the State Department and the White House, for wanting Israel to do it, encouraging them to do it, and supporting them. Our Air Force worked very closely with the Israeli Air Force for months before this, not necessarily with a deadline, knowing when it would happen. It was always going to be whenever there was an incident, they would take advantage of an incident. The word I used was fortunate timing. When Hezbollah grabbed some of the Israeli soldiers in early July, that was then a pretext, I think that's the only word, for a major offensive that had been in the works a long time.
Libya.
Today we can definitively say that the Gaddafi regime has come to an end. The last major regime strongholds have fallen. The new government is consolidating the control over the country, and one of the world's longest-serving dictators is no more.
Gaddafi did a lot of good, okay? Just for the record, the reason why they took him out, one of the primary reason was because he wanted to make a Libyan pound, I believe. Maybe it was another name, but it was a gold standard currency, and he was going to trade oil with it, which is a huge no-no because, you know, the U.S. is an empire, and to make sure you are not deceived, I'm not trying to deceive you. You need to see both pictures. And I, for one, to be honest, am okay with America basically being the world empire. And to stay in power, we need to keep the petrodollar. So, you know, he did a lot of good for his country. He allowed women to be educated. He made sure students could be educated. He made irrigation and internet and a lot of other just utilitarian type services and infrastructures to be erected in his country. So he did a lot of good, but we took him out because do not mess with the petrodollar. Sadly, we have to support that. Otherwise, I mean, overnight, America would be just as poor as any of these countries. Honestly, just as poor as Russia, for example. The only reason the U.S. is as wealthy as we are is because of the petrodollar. Fact.
Somalia.
Well, violence isn't only on the rise in Afghanistan. In fact, it looks like America's shadow wars have now increased by one. Drone strikes have long been reported in Pakistan and Yemen, but now there's news that a week ago, a U.S. drone aircraft fired on 2 leaders of the Somalian organization Al-Shabaab.
Sudan.
President Obama is sending 100 combat-equipped troops to Central Africa to advise local forces on getting rid of one of the continent's most vicious operatives, Joseph Kony, the head of the Lord's Resistance Army, a group responsible for atrocities across the region.
This guy, I believe Joseph Kony was the guy who would go into combat naked because he thought he was like being divinely protected or something. Later, he converted to Christianity. He's still alive today, and he's a missionary. He's strange, I know.
It's the first open deployment of U.S. ground combat power to Africa since the Black Hawk Down incident in Somalia in the 1990s that killed 18 troops. U.S. troops may wind up now in Uganda, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's part of a growing military effort to engage in Africa.
Finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you.
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
I'm not going to give you his name.
So go through the countries again?
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
Great video. Okay, so now you've got a good picture of the fact that America has an old agenda, and what you need to understand is everything is connected, guys. I mean, everything. So if you want to get the big picture, you just don't have enough time. I know I'm very lucky right now because I have the time, because to be honest with you, I have a job that allows me to just listen to whatever I want to all day. To understand this, you need to understand Zionism. You need to understand the state of Israel, the Zionist state of Israel, the Rothschilds and their involvement, what really happened in World War II, why the Holocaust even happened, and why it's, I'm not a Holocaust denier, but why it happened and why it was artificially perpetuated, and why there's a huge exaggeration because no gas chambers were actually used in World War II by Nazis. That is an entirely huge lie. And you can find hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of footage, which will tell you that. If you want to get a good starting point on that, I have one video out on it now, and I'm going to make a second one on it soon because it's a fascinating subject. And again, everything's connected. And this does directly, obviously, relate to the Rothschilds and their intention of basically taking over the Middle East. They need to completely destabilize the Middle East so that Israel can basically rule over it. And the U.S. is basically under Zionist control. So are the Jesuits. So is the Catholic Church. To some extent, and being able to make strong connections to those, showing you those ties could take a lot of time. And I'll be honest, I'll totally be honest with you and just say, I think I know enough to say that there probably is absolute ties there. I can't prove them to you right now. I can't. I'm not going to be biased, and I'm not going to sound like I'm talking out of my ass here, but there's a huge big picture here. And that's what I'm getting at, is that Syria is going down, Assad will be taken out. I think if we're lucky, we're going to tiptoe around Russia. Russia's trying to stop. Again, Russia is a good guy in this situation, and they're trying to take care of Syria. And because they're involved here, we can't just do whatever the hell we want. If they didn't go in, if they weren't invited, America would have people on the ground
cleaned up shop fighting ISIS. And if you don't already know, this is another important topic. ISIS is controlled and led by U.S. intelligence from bases in Turkey. Speaking of Turkey, let's go back to the evidence of why we know this is a false flag attack in Syria with the chemicals, because President Assad would never use a chemical or, whatever kind of chemical weapon on his own people. For one, forget what I just said, but they did do it in 2014, and they're working with Russia. So again, this would make Russia look really bad if Syria was actually using real weapons of their own making, even though they were supposed to help Syria dismantle all these chemical weapons, which are illegal even in war, because of how cruel chemical weapons are to use on people. I mean, just in case you haven't wrapped your mind around it, slow and very painful death, and especially if you don't die, it could be lifelong pain that you have in your lungs or whatever the symptoms are that you get could be lifelong versus a bullet or an explosion or instantaneous. Anyways, so what you should know about the attack is they used sarin gas. Sarin gas is 26 times more potent than hydrogen cyanide. Okay, that's what they supposedly used Nazi German camps to gas the Jews. And again, like it is said, that didn't actually happen. And there's tons of cool evidence. I mean, this is, we live in the age of information, so I'm sticking my neck out there, guys, to say I've done more than enough evidence to say I'm sure about this much. And I've actually been to Germany and looked at a concentration camp. So anyways, I'm going to do a part 2 video on that in the near future anyway. So back to the topic at hand. So thanks to the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council, there weren't supposed to be chemical weapons, and yet we have evidence that sarin gas was smuggled out of Turkey to Syria. Check this out. Okay, I just want to preface this with the New York Times is the author here. I do not trust these people at all, not at all, but nonetheless, ban their evading sarin used Syria chemical attacks. Turkey says, I've seen footage. I'm not going to be able to find it for you guys, but you can find it on your own if you're willing to look. Alright, so there's tons of evidence. The white hats or the UN NATO troops were handling people that were supposedly affected by sarin gas with bare hands and simple respirator masks. If you know anything about sarin gas, it is so potent that contact with it with your skin can literally lead to death. Okay, so that's one point of evidence. We've got the smuggling from Turkey evidence. We've got the evidence that points to the U.S. and ISIS being the culprit, and potentially a real chemical attack happening nonetheless. But also we've got footage of a bunch of children having been bludgeoned to death. And then we've got President Trump here giving a speech, and just listen to his demeanor and how he speaks. Much more presidential, and he's part of the system now, unfortunately. Been indoctrinated. He knows how to talk a little bit more like Obama, if you will, in the sense that he uses terror, or I shouldn't say Obama, more like George W. Bush Jr., where if you remember that one speech, he said the word terror or terrorist about 28 times in one speech. So, that's the kind of verbiage that kind of hypnotizes people and just makes them feel angry or hatred for a certain group or party, and allows people to give up the will or decision making ability they have and be okay with going to another war. Okay, it's your emotions. These people know that tugging on your emotions is more important than the facts, and that's something that needs to be up to pass everyone. I think we need to be okay with saying that authority is not truth. Truth is authority. Okay? Remember that. Authority is not truth. Truth is authority. Listen to Trump right now.
Yesterday, chemical attack a chemical attack that was so horrific in Syria against innocent people, including women, small children, and even beautiful little babies. Their deaths was an...
See these pauses, his pauses in between what he's saying. I mean, it leaves your mind to think. It's very subliminal, very. I hate to say the word. I hate to say the word occult, occultish or something, because that's the way of the occult, is understanding how the mind thinks, thus being able to persuade you. Don't want to be persuaded of. Anyways, let's finish listening to Trump real quick, and then I'm going to wrap this up.
An affront to humanity. These heinous actions by the Assad regime cannot be tolerated. The United States stands with our allies across the globe to condemn this horrific attack and all other horrific attacks.
Okay. See how he was about to say something at the end there? Now with him, he didn't say anything. Anyways, and all other horrific attacks. Guys, war is on the horizon. It's getting scary, guys. We need to be prepared. We need to be informed. Please, talk about this stuff with your friends. Talk about it with your family. I'm not asking you to share this on Facebook because this stuff is scary. And, some of the stuff I said in this video could literally get me arrested in several countries worldwide. And I'm not kidding. That's the scary part. Okay? I live in the freest country on planet Earth, I believe. And I want to keep it that way. So I'm going to keep blowing my little whistle. All right? Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, guys. This is Destination Truth. I hope you learned something. If you have questions, please watch some of the other videos that I linked below. There's some other videos of other people talking about how this is a false flag attack, and I agree with them. Have a good night.
I'm just getting warmed up. This is Von Clausewitz shit. Total fucking war. I'm gonna pull the whole thing down. I'm gonna bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head. It's gonna be biblical.